AB Live, a new news-based chat show in which we discuss topics ranging from business, news, politics, and so much more. On today's show, we are discussing cybersecurity, and with me right now is Jeff Ogden, who is the General Manager, Middle East of Mimecast. Thank you so much for joining us today, Jeff.
Nice to be here.
Right, Jeff, before we get into the topic today, can you just tell us a little bit about Mimecast and what it does?
Absolutely. Mimecast is a cyber resilience company for email. So we take care of people's email infrastructure. We make sure that it's protected from cyber threats, and in the event of a cyber threat that they can recover successfully and they don't lose any data.
All right, great. So we need to talk about cybersecurity, especially with regards to email. But before that, can you just briefly tell us what or how do you think the state of cybersecurity is in the UAE?
I think cybersecurity is a huge priority for everybody. The threat is growing. There's been a huge amount of focus on cyber threats in all organizations. And we're finding that for most organizations, it's the number one priority. As organizations are going to cloud's becoming more important to make businesses more cost efficient and more efficient generally. And cybersecurity is the biggest restriction or the biggest issue when you're going to cloud.
Right, so you did mention that threat is growing. Why would you say that?
I think the threat has been evolving for many years. We see year on year the volume of threats growing and the complexity of threats growing as well. I think as people go more and more online, individuals, workers need to get access to data, then going online is the right thing to do.
Right.
So therefore, the threat grows at the same rate as organizations become more public, more open, and make data more accessible.
Right, so Jeff, Dubai does have a cybersecurity strategy which focuses on a number of things, including confidentiality, integrity, availability, and privacy of data.
Yep.
So while talking about all of these different things, what would you say is the major cause of concern right now in the region?
I think, first of all, the government have done a very good job here in the UAE of setting standards. They've, I've been in the region now for 13 years, and the standards have been available for a long, long time. I think implementing those standards becomes a challenge because you have organizations that don't necessarily all have the same structure, and they have to interpret that legislation and find ways of following the policy, but implementing secure infrastructure at the same time. So it's quite difficult for organizations to interpret those policies and then acquire the appropriate technology and skills to make their organizations open but secure at the same time.
Right, so what are the main threats that we are talking about right now in this entire scheme?
Yeah, so I think the biggest threat for everybody is still through email. So organizations, the easiest way to access an organization is by sending an email. If you can send an email that's infected with something that gets access to an organization, then that's the easiest way in. Most organizations have got very good at defending their perimeter, defending their data centers, but their people reading emails is a weak point.
Right.
And that's probably the biggest threat. And I would imagine over 90% of the threats that organizations get now come through email.
Interesting. So now that you've said that emails is the number one vector when it comes to breaches, why would you say it's still prevalent in this region right now? Why are there so many email breaches happening?
I think there's many elements to it. I mean, the first thing is that you have your employees. Employees don't necessarily recognize a threat when it comes through on email. We're all getting better, but the diversity of threats is huge. Mm-hmm. So expecting an individual, an employee, to always be on top of the cyber threat, recognize it, and then respond accordingly is a challenge. It's a difficult thing to do.
Right.
So that's the first thing, the people. The second is the technology itself. A lot of technology has to be equally complex to defend from a complex problem. So deploying it is difficult, and finding the skills to support it is extremely difficult as well. So I think there's definitely a skill shortage in the region, mm-hmm. And that gets exploited as well. So
Right.
those are two very big issues for organizations.
Right. So, Jeff, do you think there is something that organizations in the region, governments can actually do to tackle these issues, especially with regards to email breaches? Is there like a cultural change or a norm change that needs to be coming about?
Yeah, I think in the same way that organizations are opening up and starting to use technologies like cloud, cloud can also be used to protect your organization.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the adoption of cloud, organizations in this region, about 50 to 60% of organizations interviewed will tell you that they're going to cloud in the next 12 to 24 months.
Right.
So using a cloud technology provider as well to provide your security is a good way. It's a good approach. It's low cost. It means that you don't necessarily have to invest so much in hardware, software, and people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a good way to try and drive some enhanced security within your environment.
Right. So it looks like technology is the problem and the solution then.
It is, absolutely. We see, the challenge with the threat is that the hackers are using technology as well.
Mm-hmm.
Equally, they're adapting their technology to make the threat more complex. So obviously the end user has to do the same thing, of course.
Right. So BECs, of course, is one of the major problems with regards to email security and email cyber threats.
Yeah.
But do you also think BYOD, that's bring your own device system or a norm, which we were talking about earlier just before the interview, do you think that is also something that needs to probably come in a widespread and a mainstream format in the region?
Yes, for sure. We all use our emails for everything now. Coming up here today in the taxi, for example, I'm reading my briefings, catching up on my email, and I'll press links in my email and go explore things that are on websites, do some additional research.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm doing all of that on my mobile. I don't even carry my laptop with me most of the time. Now, that device doesn't always get controlled by the enterprise that you're working for, the company you're working for. So having some protection mechanism within BYOD is really important for organizations. So, you can't always control the whole mobile device within an organization, but if you can control an element of it
Mm-hmm.
within the device itself and then provide protection
Yeah.
on top of that, then, that's one way that you can start to address the problem. Within our solution, for example, any link that gets pressed on from a mobile device gets checked.
Mm-hmm.
So we can enable things on mobile devices to try and enhance security for those mobile users as well.
Right.
So yeah, BYD is very important as obviously we become more dependent on tablets and mobile phones. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Again, now we are in the first quarter of 2019. So what would you say is your outlook or sort of prediction when it comes to cybersecurity trends for this year and the coming years?
Yeah, the threat will continue to grow, both in volume and complexity, that's for sure. So, it's important that from that point of view that organizations are looking at the best technology to try and defend those sorts of things. So as the complexity grows, as individuals within the organization get tested
Mm-hmm.
with these new threats,
Yeah.
it's important to try and control those individuals, educate those individuals, make sure that they have the skills and also to try and defend those threats as well.
Okay, so you mentioned education and of course awareness being
Yep.
key, but what is a way that user awareness can be increased? Even if you're talking about companies and organizations, do you think there needs to be more done in terms of training individuals?
Yes, absolutely. We use a technology that is primarily humor and video based with organizations. So it's an awareness program that gets distributed when the event happens, which is really important. I think if I asked you to go and do some learning for 30 minutes about security, you'd probably last 5 or 10 minutes and then think to yourself, hey, listen, I've got something better to do. So one of the areas that's really important is to try and find a media that people enjoy using.
Mm-hmm.
So we use a lot of videos, and when the incident happens within an organization, we say to the individual, do you think this is a threat or you think this is okay? And if they answer the question incorrectly, then we can stream them a very short 2-minute video that explains what the issue is and how they can defend themselves against it.
Okay.
So education programs are really important. There's a lot of them around, But finding something that fits the mentality of the employees nowadays as well is also very important.
All right. So Jeff, again, since we are on those lines right now as a cybersecurity firm, I want to know what are the major challenges that firms across the region face?
Yeah. So, I mean, it continues to be some of the things I've mentioned. So, skilled resources, finding the right people with the right skills to help you defend these issues is difficult. Finding the right technologies. I mean, most businesses today are under commercial, financial pressure on a day-to-day basis. They're always trying to reduce cost.
Yeah.
So sometimes to defend these problems, you may need 6 or 7 different technologies.
Right.
So you introduce a lot of cost and complexity into an organization. What we try and do in Mimecast is try and come up with a single platform, a single instance that fixes many, many business problems. So we have 10 technologies running inside our cloud to try and address the issue. And when we go to customers, we say, hey, listen, we can reduce the cost and complexity, and we can help you address this complex problem with one solution.
Okay.
And I think that's really important for organizations if they can just buy one platform that helps them address probably the biggest threat that they're going to have in email. Yeah?
All right, so fund allocation needs to be done, but you're obviously with Mimecast are doing it very efficiently. But since we're talking about funds and cost here, I am curious to know what is the amount of loss or the amount of damage in terms of monetary damage that is caused to a government or an organization, especially in the UAE, due to cyber threats and cyber crimes.
You know, it's always a difficult thing to quantify. There are tangibles and intangibles when it comes to loss. A recent study said that probably about $160 per record per company is
that's
the sort of absolutely. So it's not insignificant.
Yeah.
But obviously there's all the intangibles as well. There's the we see on a regular basis people that have suffered breaches, and the share price will dip significantly. We've seen organisations lose 20 or 30% of their stock price. On large breaches.
Yeah.
But also there's brand. What happens if that happens in a local entity here? Are you prepared to give them your personal identifiable information going forwards? Probably not.
Yeah.
So those are intangibles. These are the future sales that you may lose in those sorts of situations. So I mean, a single breach in a year is significant for any company, both in outage time, brand, and the loss that we just talked about.
So it is definitely hitting the economy in many ways than we can actually imagine at this point. But right now what I want to get at is you've mentioned lack of skills, training is required, awareness is required, and all of those things, which is sort of focusing on manpower and on human beings, although technology has been a solution for a while for all of these problems now, or to overcome it rather. So now what I want to know is what needs to be done in terms of recruitment and employment in the cybersecurity firms and cybersecurity sector in general.
Yeah.
What are the innovations that can be brought about? Because we know that there are hackathons happening, there are capture the flag events, there are hack in the box events happening all the time. What more needs to be done? I
think, clearly you have to have the same skills as the hacker in many respects, but you also have to draw a line between, the hacker and the ethical hacker. In most organizations, they'll adopt or recruit external parties to come in and test their systems in the same way that a hacker would test systems. The red-blue team that you've talked about, the hackathons, I think is a great way of doing that. But there's a lot of educational systems that are available now within organizations to teach people, to take them through scenarios, threat scenarios, and try and improve their level of awareness and technical ability to try and defend the threats as well.
All right, interesting. And now finally, Jeff, I need to ask you, there are a lot of people who are watching us right now, and from a more end user perspective, what is it that we can do in order to protect ourselves from cyber threats?
Yeah, I think it depends on the organization's size, first and foremost. I mean, we're seeing hackers move away from enterprise, more into the mid-market, more into the SMB space. And I think each of those types of organization will have different ways of defending themselves. I think in the large enterprise, then obviously it's selecting the right technology and having the skills internally, maybe a security operations center and those sorts of things. They're a little bit more advanced in those sorts of areas. In the SMB space and the mid-market space, where they really don't have the skills, then it really is about building a strong partnership with an organization that can help with the technology, the skills, the ongoing 7x24 support, and everything else that goes with it. So, so for us, with those sorts of organizations, having a single platform is advantageous.
Yeah.
We provide a lot of professional services support, 7x24 help desk support and everything for those small SMBs, so they can take a single platform and defend the vast majority of the problems with a single provider.
Right.
So I think that's where we're trying to help organizations as well.
Right, but are there certain basic measures that we can take as users sitting at home and using our desktops, laptops, iPads, etc.?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it always comes back to very simple things in these situations. You have to make sure that the password is a strong password, and that you change it on a regular basis.
Not 1, 2, 3, 4.
Absolutely, you don't use the same thing all of the time.
Yeah.
Make sure that you're running an appropriate technology on your device as well, to defend those sorts of things, and keep aware of these threats. I mean, threat intelligence and threat intelligence information is becoming important for everybody, not the individual as well as corporates.
Right.
So have access to forward-looking threat intelligence that tells you what's coming along, what sort of things have happened to other organizations recently. Those are all good things to keep abreast of.
All right, great. Thank you so much for those insights, Jeff. We've definitely learned a lot, and we're going to keep all of those tips in mind next time. And thank you for joining us on AB Live today.
It was a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Right, you are watching AB Live. We will be back again next Tuesday with another topic to discuss. So don't go anywhere.